This week's Parsha, Parshat Ki Tavo, contains the description of a very interesting ritual or event that the Israelites are supposed to take part in, participate in, as they enter into the land. Remember that we're nearing the end of the Torah, and we're talking about what's going to happen as soon as the Israelites do enter and cross over the Jordan. And one thing they're supposed to do is to set up stones in and over the Jordan River, which sort of mark their passing into the land. And on those stones, they're supposed to plaster over them and write on them, as our Parsha tells us, this is Deuteronomy chapter 27, verse 8, V'chatavta al ha'avanim, you should write on these stones, at kol divrei haTorah hazot, all the words of this Torah, ba'er hetev, well explained, well explicated. So, what does it mean that we're supposed to write all the words of the Torah on these stones? Well explained. The midrash, famously, and it's cited by Rashi, the midrash is originally found in Masechet Sota, Daf Lamed Bet Amud Aleph, tractate Sota, page 32a, says that what does it mean, well explicated? B'shivim lashon, in 70 languages. There's an idea, Talmudic idea, Midrashic idea, that the world contains or contained 70 world languages. And all of those languages, the Torah should be seemingly interpreted and translated on these stones into those languages. So, what are we to do with this idea? Let's read, as we do every week, Rabbi Baruch HaLevi Epstein, the Torah Temimah. Says as follows. Hamafarshim parshu b'tam hadavar kadei sheyavinu kol ha'umut v'yadu ma shekatuv b'Torah. So generally, commentators have said that what's the idea here? That all the nations of the world should know what is written in the Torah. As you enter into the land, you cross the Jordan, you see, here's the words of our Torah in every language so everyone could understand. Separately, I should say, parenthetically, that some have seen that there's a mirror here. This parallels the mezuzah that every Jewish home has on its doorpost. That when you enter into a new home, you see there's words of the Torah right there. Here too, you enter into the land of Israel, you cross over the Jordan, all the words of the Torah right there in any language, so everyone should be able to understand. But now there's some seemingly apparent and obvious problems or questions with this idea. Kvar tirchu va'amlu hamafarshim lafarash hadavar kipshuto, says the Torah Temimah. Many commentators have already struggled to figure out the pshat, the simple understanding here. Shahaita kol Torah kula ktuva al avanim muateket b'shivim lashon asher zed davar shelo yishuar. Because let's be honest, he says, it seems physically impossible to write all the words of the Torah in 70 languages on these stones. Why? Because the Torah is incredibly long. And to multiply this incredibly long text, which we, in our Sifrei Torah, in our Torah scrolls, which we have in synagogues around the world, they're written on lengths and lengths and pieces of parchment, which are rolled together. So you're going to tell me that that multiplied by 70, you could fit on these stones? We're not talking mountains, we're saying stones. He says that's just practically impossible. So what else could it mean? So now we have an interesting idea that the Torah Temimah introduces. L'chein karov lomar zerak aseret hadibrot hayu ketuvim alehen. Maybe it's not the entire Torah, but what? Just the 10 Commandments. Which is a much smaller piece. Does he have any proof for this? He says, Kasemech raya l'davar. There's maybe an allusion to this. Efshar lahasmich melashon, that you could infer from that's the verse we just read, because he notes that the verse said you should write all the words of the Torah, divrei haTorah, and he says if the Torah had wanted us to do literally the entire Torah, it could have not used the word divrei. It would have simply said, Katavta al ha'avanim haTorah. You should have written on the stones the Torah, rather than saying divrei haTorah, the words of the Torah. Now, a pushback to him is it doesn't just say the words of the Torah. It says kol hadivrei, all the words of the Torah. But he says maybe that's an illusion, that it was only supposed to be some of the Torah. So now he's limited the scope and said it's not that we're going to translate the entire Torah into 70 languages, but rather just the 10 Commandments, which does limit it somewhat. And he goes on. He says, Amnam lule divrei hamefarshim haya efshar lefaresh halashon b'shivim lashon lo kamo sheragilim lefaresh b'shivim safot. He says, now, it's true, most commentators understand this notion that Rashi cites, that the Torah is to be interpreted in 70 languages, like we would use the word language today. Spanish, French, German, Swahili, Korean, etc. 70 world languages. But the Torah Temimah says, I would have preferred to explain it a different way. There is a text in the Zohar, he cites right now, Sheha Sanhedrin hayu yodim b'shivim lashon. That the Sanhedrin, there's a notion that the great court, the great body of law in Jerusalem, and then later in other places in Israel, the Sanhedrin knew 70 languages. The Zohar explains that, not meaning like these 70 world languages, but rather, inun shivim panim l'Torah. That what's it mean when it says the Sanhedrin knew the 70 languages? That they knew the 70 sides or faces of explicating the Torah. It's another midrashic idea that the Torah has 70 faces, that every idea in the Torah could be explained on some level or at least 70 ways. So the Zohar makes this connection in the number 70. 70 world languages, 70 ways of interpreting the Torah. Says that when it says, the Midrash says that the Sanhedrin knew 70 languages, it really means they understood this deep insights to the Torah and could fully explicate it in all of its 70 faces. Using that idea, the Torah Temimah wants to apply that to our Midrash here and say, what does it mean when the Gemara and then Rashi cites that we were to write these words of the Torah in 70 languages, not in the 70 world languages, but rather Yitba'er ma'od halashon be'er hetev. That what is it that the words of the Torah that were written down, and we already know that for the Torah Temimah that means maybe the 10 Commandments. Shenit ba'ara haTorah mikol panim umikol tzad. That those 10 Commandments would be explained from every direction and from every angle. The depths and meaning fully plumbed. So the Torah has this idea that when the Israelites enter into the land of Israel and cross the Jordan, they're supposed to set up these rocks, plaster them, and write the words of the Torah. This has typically been understood to mean all of the Torah in all 70 languages. The Torah Temimah says, look, that just doesn't make sense on its face. That's practically impossible. There's not enough room. The sizing doesn't work. So he says instead, suggests two things. One, that it's the 10 Commandments, not the entire Torah, much smaller citation. And it's not really translating into 70 languages, but rather it's the 70 faces of the Torah, which is code for fully explicating, fully bringing up all the different interpretations, meanings, and values that are implicit and inherent in the 10 Commandments and bringing them to the fore, and that's what would be written on these stones. Beautiful idea, innovative approach by the Torah Temimah. Always a pleasure learning with you. More next week.